Good morning. I am Assemblywoman Petrie-Norris. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am really pleased also to be joined by my colleague, Senator Pat Bates, by the Orange County Sheriff, Don Barnes, by Jaime Puerta, Amy Neville, and Matt Capilouto, families who have been devastated by the opioid epidemic. Seems like the opioid crisis is the one thing in California that has not paused for COVID-19. It is raging all across our state, leaving destruction, death, and heartache in its wake. This tragedy is increasingly being fueled by the rise of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, which is now the leading cause of opioid-related deaths. Fentanyl is one of the most dangerous and deadly substances in the world. Just 2 milligrams is enough to kill. That's 2 grains of salt. It's enough to kill, and kill it certainly has. In the past 3 years, fentanyl-related deaths have risen by more than 500%. 37% of all drug-related deaths now involve fentanyl. But despite how dangerous, how deadly this poison is, California's criminal code actually treats fentanyl less seriously than substances like cocaine and heroin. This just does not make any sense. And this illogical classification has created perverse and deadly incentives, leading to a huge increase in fentanyl being trafficked across our borders. In the last 4 years alone, the Orange County Sheriff's Department has seized 388 pounds of fentanyl. That is the equivalent of 88 million lethal doses. It is time for California to take action to stop this madness. AB 1351 seeks to stop fentanyl at the source. AB 1351 will align fentanyl on the same level as cocaine and heroin by including it in the enhancement statute. This bill will specifically increase penalties on those who traffic in this poison. I'm also proud to be a principal co-author on Senator Bates' SB 75, which mirrors these efforts in the Senate. Grateful to be joined by Senator Bates today, who, like me, understands the urgency of this crisis, and by Sheriff Barnes, who has been working tirelessly to combat the opioid crisis and to save lives in Orange County. Thank you both for your partnership and your leadership. And I want to especially say thank you to the families who are here today. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for your bravery. And thank you for your commitment to fighting this public health crisis. And with that, I am pleased to welcome Jaime Puerta. Jaime. Jaime, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll try not to get emotional, but I always do when I talk about my beautiful son, Daniel. Daniel Joseph Puerta, my son, he was my only son. He was 16 and a half years old when he passed away on August the 6th of 2020. My son was a very intelligent, charismatic, and loving human being who loved life. He loved nature. He couldn't watch a commercial about pet adoptions because it would make him cry. He loved playing football. He had more friends that were girls than that were boys, due to the fact they all loved going to him because, one, he was so handsome, but moreover, he was a great person. He was a great listener. And he loved listening, and he loved to try to be empathetic with his partner, with his classmates' problems. Daniel, during COVID-19, not that I want to blame it on COVID-19, we were all in our home on lockdown because of COVID-19. I believe he got bored and he went onto Snapchat and hashtag oxycodone, and somebody delivered an oxycodone to him a block away from our home on on April the 1st. We had a wonderful dinner. He came to me, he hugged me, he gave me a kiss on the cheek, something that he usually didn't do. We laughed. We were talking about our future plans and what we were going to do. And the next morning when I went into his room, I found him dead. Something no parent should ever have to see, ever. And called 911, and they came and they took him to Los Angeles Children's Hospital. They were able to bring him back to life, but he was in a deep coma. And the doctors told him that told us they were never going to come back. I found half a blue pill on top of his dresser, and I gave it to my local law enforcement, who did an analysis of it, and it turned out to be pure fentanyl. My research, when I looked at the blue pill, I thought it was a 30 milligram oxycodone pill, but it wasn't an oxycodone pill. It was pure fentanyl. And the more research I did, I came to find out that thousands upon thousands of children have been dying, not only in Southern California, but throughout the nation. And there are drug dealers on these social media platforms that are selling their drugs to our children. And I don't understand how that can happen in a society like ours, especially taking the life of a 16-year-old boy. I do not condone my son's wanting to try drugs, but he didn't deserve to die for it. And unfortunately, talking to my local law enforcement, they don't have the tools that they need so they can actively prosecute these drug dealers who are selling these drugs to our children. They are walking the streets today. I don't understand how this can be. I don't understand how this can be true. Our law enforcement and our legislators, when they swore and took an oath, they swore to protect and to serve. And we are asking our law enforcement and our legislators to please protect us from the scourge of fentanyl in our communities, and to please serve justice. I know that our legislators in Sacramento do not agree with death, and I'm sure the legislators do not agree or are for the children dying in Southern California. So I'm asking you personally, I'm asking you for my son Daniel to please, I beg you, to please pass these bills. As a bereaved father, I cannot take any more parents losing their children. So if you could please pass these bills, I would truly appreciate it. Love this boy. And with that, I'll pass it off to Senator Bates. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm so emotional, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Puerta. Am I on? Claudia, am I on? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Puerta, for sharing your story. And I want to thank Assemblymember Petrie-Norris, Sheriff Barnes, and all the parents here today. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your courage. I have a lump in my throat after your presentation, Mr. Puerta. Every time this happens, I think we all feel that way. So we do stand united in our goal to save lives. With fentanyl-related tragedies continuing to rise, California must act as Congress has and treat fentanyl as the exceptionally dangerous drug that it is. The legislature must include fentanyl in the state's category of dangerous drugs, subject to penalty enhancements for distributing, trafficking, and selling mass quantities of this drug. There is no reason why fentanyl should continue to be exempted from the state's category of dangerous drugs like heroin and cocaine that are subject to penalty enhancements by weight. In 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019, I introduced legislation very similar to what we are proposing today, my SB 75 and Assembly Member Petrie-Norris's AB 1351 proposed today to increase penalties to help stop fentanyl traffickers. However, my prior bills were rejected because a majority of committee members believe that increased penalties are counterproductive to criminal justice reform. But I want you to know I was a social worker. I actually worked in the communities most hardly hit by drug addiction, and I do support criminal justice reform in every form that is taken. However, fentanyl is not marijuana. It's neither heroin, it's not cocaine, which are wholly different drugs. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that is 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine and can kill in just 2 minutes after ingestion. It is also transdermal, and many of our first responders have been affected by that trying to treat individuals. We believe a stronger penalty deterrent is needed to help law enforcement hold traffickers accountable and significantly curb massive quantities of fentanyl being imported into our state and our nation. The illegal distribution of fentanyl has taken many lives, and the parents with us today who lost their loved ones are a powerful, powerful, powerful testament for the need for action. With their support and those of many others affected by fentanyl, I hope this is finally the year the legislature will send a bill to the governor, whether it's SB 75 or AB 1351. It is so very needed. Thank you so much. And our next speaker is Amy Neville.
Thank you very much, Senator, and thank you, Assemblywoman Petrie-Norris, for having me here today. My name is Amy Neville, and I am from Orange County. This is my son, Alexander. Alexander was very much an average teenager with a deep curiosity for many things. He loved to skateboard, play video games, hang out with his friends, and naturally harass his younger sister. He even had a thriving little eBay business that he was very proud of. The week of June 17th, 2020, Alexander's curiosity led him to experimenting with pills purchased from a dealer through social media. The evening of June 21st, Alexander told us what had been happening the previous few days. The pills had a hold on him, and he did not understand why. On the morning of June 22nd, I called the treatment facility. We had to wait for them to call back with their recommendation. That night, Alex took his final pill. On the morning of June 23rd, I found Alex dead on the floor of his bedroom. And this is how most of these kids are dying, in the night, alone in their rooms. We were very confused, and we just could not understand why or how one oxycodone pill could kill him. We quickly learned that it was fentanyl poisoning. It had been fentanyl the entire few days, and that is why it had such a grip on him. While I do not condone my son's drug use, I do not condone his drug use, but however, he was duped by a drug dealer. Alex believed he was taking and was sold oxycodone, not fentanyl. At least 2 other people have died from fentanyl poisoning from this dealer's counterfeit pills. One before Alex and one after. Fentanyl affects everyone from the first-time user to those suffering with long-term substance use disorder. No one, absolutely no one, deserves to die this way. And you might be asking yourself, so where is this drug dealer now? Because of existing laws, he is free. He's living his life. He's still selling drugs. Well, my son is in an urn on a shelf in his bedroom. I know that none of this will bring back my child, but this is the start of saving yours. Please, please pay attention to what's happening with these bills, and please support them. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sheriff Barnes. Thank you.
Amy, every time I hear a story, it's heartbreaking, and yours of Matt and Jaime as well. I've told you before that when you don't respond with emotions, you should be more afraid of when you don't respond with emotions you have than as you are. And I want to thank each of you for sharing your experiences publicly. I know it's not easy, but it's also necessary. I also want to thank Senator Pat Bates and Assemblywoman Petrie-Norris for taking up these bills we sponsored from the Sheriff's Department and carrying them with each of your respective houses within the California legislature and how important this is. These painful stories are another reminder of the impacts that fentanyl has had among our community. And I can't stress enough how much we've been fighting to change this law. The law as it exists today has enhanced penalties for trafficking and sales of narcotics by weight for methamphetamine, for heroin, for cocaine, but explicitly does not include fentanyl. In 2016, I was fortunate enough to have sponsored a bill carried by Senator Pat Bates and testified to the Senate Public Safety Committee on the necessity of this emerging threat of the time of fentanyl and what the dangers it was imposing upon our community. And when I testified to the Public Safety Committee that year, I was told two things. One, there are no deaths that could be corroborated to fentanyl to show an increase. And we now know that that is not the case. In the last 5 years, from 2014, 5-year period, 2014, 2019, over 1,400% increase specific to fentanyl-related deaths that have occurred within the state of California. So in 2016, we had an opportunity to be proactive and not be responsive to this threat. The second thing I was told was fentanyl is always trafficked with and laced with another narcotic, making it the legislation as proposed at that time to be irrelevant and not necessary. And that again proved to be not true. In the years following 2017, in the Sheriff's Department alone, not including other law enforcement agencies throughout California, just the Sheriff's Department, we seized 12 pounds of pure fentanyl the year following, 103 pounds of pure fentanyl in 2018, and 208 pounds of pure fentanyl in 2019, exponentially increasing every year. And it's because the law does not include this narcotic. It's less costly to produce for the cartels. It's easier to traffic because 1 kilo of fentanyl is equivalent to 50 kilos of heroin. And we're seeing new brands of fentanyl coming across the California border now that are 100 times more potent than the fentanyl we're seeing currently. I'm all in for criminal justice reform. I think that's necessary, and I will never advocate for the incarceration of drug-addicted individuals. That's not what we should be doing to treat these people of substance use disorder. But criminal justice reform does not mean a pass for drug traffickers and drug dealers. They need to be held accountable for what they're doing to our public. Hundreds of people have been impacted by these gaps in the law, and we need to hold these people accountable and change the course for our kids' future. I do want to also cover one important topic. In 2016, we saw in the Orange County Crime Lab the first fentanyl through toxicology west of the Mississippi. And at that point, we made it as deliberate attempt in a policy to put naloxone out in the hands of every deputy sheriff within the Orange County Sheriff's Department. The deaths that you see that have gone up over 1,400% do not include the fentanyl-related poisonings that are happening that our deputies are bringing back through our naloxone program. Hundreds of lives saved through a naloxone program that fortunately are not counted within those numbers. But today is the time that we need to act once and for all. We can no longer ignore the impacts that fentanyl is having within our communities. And God forbid we have to tell one more story, one more family impacted, to share the horrific experiences that are being shared today by Amy, Matt, and Jaime. One death is too many, 100 deaths is unexplainable, and the thousands of deaths we're experiencing is a sad reflection of our state. We need to take action. I highly encourage and support the actions of both Assemblywoman Petrie-Norris and Senator Pat Bates. Now is the time. We cannot be having this conversation again next year when more lives are lost. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt Capilouto to share his story. Matt, thank you for joining us, and I appreciate you being here to share with us.
Thank you, Sheriff Barnes. This is my daughter, Alexandra Capilouto. My daughter, Alex, was a very empathetic girl. She felt other people's pain more than her own. When she was in her teenage years, she was diagnosed with massive depression disorder, insomnia, and anxiety. Alex grew up in a two-parent household. We're a church-going family. We're strong in our faith. We kept Alex in sports. She was in extracurricular programs. She studied hard. To the outside world, you wouldn't know that she had internal sufferings. She got into Arizona State University on a full academic scholarship. And she was on home for Christmas break, December 2019, 2 days before Christmas. She spent the day shopping with my wife. They had a great day together. That evening, unbeknownst to us, my daughter went on social media. She went in search of oxycodone. And on social media, Snapchat to be exact, a drug dealer responded and offered to bring her an oxycodone pill. That evening, I remember my daughter coming in my room, sharing with me some of the Christmas presents she bought that day with my wife to give to her family members, her siblings. And she went to bed. The next morning, I went to work as normal. And I received a call from my youngest daughter about 10 a.m. that said, "Dad, come home, Alex is dead." I rushed home, found my wife in hysterics, my youngest daughter, confused. We found out that she received a counterfeit oxycodone pill made simply of pure fentanyl. Her toxicology report showed that it was enough fentanyl to kill 5 people. Today, that drug dealer is still out selling drugs. I don't know why this is either, as my good friend Jaime and Amy has stated. If you don't think this can happen to your family, you're fooling yourself. This epidemic is beyond measure. I don't want to diminish the coronavirus. I don't want to diminish school shootings. All are tragic. But odds are your child is more likely to die from fentanyl poisoning than anything else. And something needs to be done about this. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you again to Amy and Jaime for being here and for sharing your stories. No parent should have to endure what you did. And I just want to thank all of you for your advocacy and for your commitment to protecting California kids. With that, happy to open it up to questions from members of the media. You can go ahead and use the raise hand function, and Lizzie Kutsona will recognize you for your question.
Like the Assemblywoman said, if you are a member of the media and have a question, please use the raise hand function and we will call on you and unmute you. I do have a question from Matt Sesbo. My apologies for if I mispronounced your name, from the Daily Pilot. I will go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, hello. My question was just, fentanyl seems to be not as well known to the general public as other drugs that were mentioned before, like cocaine and heroin. How important is it just to kind of raise public awareness of this dangerous drug?
Matt, I can start. I think it is incredibly important. I think you're absolutely right that there is a huge awareness gap. And that is one of the reasons that our children are being preyed upon. So I think that building awareness is a very, very important part of addressing this epidemic. Are there others that would like to add on?
Yeah, Matt, this is the sheriff. First, it's not an attempt or a lack of attempt to educate that's been the issue. It's been, I hate to say it this way, but the media's either reluctance or inability to carry the facts. We have routinely shared on social media the impacts of fentanyl. We have talked about the efforts we put forth, lives lost, drug trafficking issues. All these things have been shared and are available. And if you want some data to show or add to your story, we'll be more than happy to subsidize your story with additional information. And it's the facts are the facts. What we're seeing now, you cannot buy heroin. If you're addicted to heroin or opioids and you're a heroin user, you cannot buy heroin without it being laced with fentanyl. In fact, heroin users won't buy heroin unless it has fentanyl added to it, because it is that much more addictive and gives them, in their words, a much better high. Other narcotics are being laced with it as well. And these clandestine produced pills that are being sold as pharmaceutical produced pills, OxyContin, oxycodone, and others, including some of the boutique party drugs like ecstasy, are oftentimes laced with fentanyl, and they're being produced illicitly south of the border. These aren't chemists. They're not pharmaceutical grade produced drugs, and they're oftentimes mixed with fentanyl. And it's sad that we're at where we are today. And I don't take offense to my comment. I don't mean to make it sound like you're the reason that people don't know. But we're at a point now that is so prolific that you either are impacted or have been impacted, like Amy, Matt, and Jaime, or you will know somebody's been impacted, or you will be impacted. If you look at the numbers that we've had in deaths in California, that's up to now 1,600 in 2019 fentanyl-related deaths. That's equivalent to about 8 jets crashing. If we had 8 jets crash in California in 2019, I guarantee you there would be an uproar and a demand that we look into it and act to prevent a 9th plane crash. I don't know how much we are literally, at the sake of an anti-incarceration effort because of the language in the law, allowing drug dealers to continue killing people at the expense of our kids. And that is just not okay. And we can't have this conversation in 2022. It's falling on deaf ears. It's actually very frustrating to bring this type of legislation up year after year after year with a very courageous Senator Pat Bates at this time, and now with Assemblywoman Petrie-Norris, that she's been in office the last several years, to take up the mantle in the Assembly to right the wrongs of the lack of language and accountability that exists within the law specific to fentanyl. And it has to change because drug traffickers realize this gap, and they're specifically trafficking fentanyl because of the benefit it has for the cartels and drug traffickers without the accountability if they get caught. And it needs to be corrected. So if you want more information, I'm going to give you my chief of staff's email address. His name is Ray Grangoff. It's rgrangoff, GRANGOFF at OCSD, as in Orange County Sheriff's Department.org. And he will give you additional information, facts that we've shared over the years that will supplement your story until a very accurate reflection of what's been experienced, not only in Orange County, but throughout California.
Connie, may I jump in for a minute on that question?
Yes, please, Senator.
I do think using the term poison with the general public when we talk about this would be very important, because they look at it as a narcotic. It's oxycodone, it's an opioid, and that's something different than fentanyl. It is a poison, and I think the sheriff mentioned that this is killing people just as poison does. And I think if kids start paying attention to that also, and their parents, and we can certainly advance this notion if we participate with some of the roundtables that are going on at our school districts. We had a big one. I think you were involved in that, Dom, a couple of years ago. We had an education seminar for parents at San Clemente High School. And I was amazed at the number of parents who brought their kids, but we were still talking about it in terms of a drug addiction rather than you are ingesting poison. And I think that the poison is something that we all kind of, you know, get pushback on. So I think that could help as we go out and try to certainly get support for our measures here. And also it's something that when the public hears that term, it actually gets more attention. And that's what I intend to do. This is poisonous. Thank
Can
you.
I just back that up real fast? Just in my own experience, I've been speaking with parents through PTAs in middle schools and high schools. And the point that Senator Bates just made, I see it happen in their eyes when I talk about the difference between the poisoning and addiction and how this can happen to your kid. They get it, it clicks, and they see the reality of what it can do to that, 13 to 18-year-old age group.
I may interject as well. Part of the problem is that they're children and they're not fully developed, and they are very curious, and they're going to want to push their limits sometimes. And I think, we've all made bad decisions in our lives. And like I said before, I don't condone my son wanting to get high with what he thought was an oxycodone pill, but it wasn't an oxycodone pill. It wasn't even a pharmaceutical grade oxycodone with fentanyl. It was just pure fentanyl, a pill pressed to look like a pharmaceutical grade oxycodone 30 milligram pill. He took only half of it and it killed him. And when something like this happens to you as a parent, and somebody comes to you and says, well, your son died of an overdose, I go, what are you talking about? That's not an overdose. I give the example of, and from my good friend Michael Gray, in 1982, 7 people in the city of Chicago bought extra strength Tylenol, and those 7 people passed away. Why did they pass away? Did they die because they took too much extra strength Tylenol? Or did they die because these pills were tainted with potassium cyanide? If you remember well, in 1982, all of the Tylenol pills were taken off the shelves in every single supermarket in the country because 7 people died due to ingesting potassium cyanide. This is exactly the same thing. Our children are being duped through social media platforms to buy what they think is a pharmaceutical grade pill, whether it be Percocet, an oxycodone, or a Xanax, and it's not. It's pure fentanyl, and they die. And it's happening not only in Southern California, but throughout the nation. What happened to Alex Neville, what happened to Alexandra Neville, and what happened to Daniel Puerta. Should I say Alexandra Capilouto. What happened to our children is exactly what I just explained. So if you think that it can't happen to your family, you're sadly misinformed. This can happen to anybody.
And for the media, what Jaime just shared, and I think this is what's important as you share this message. If anybody is purchasing or getting access to what they think are pharmaceuticals in any way other than through a pharmacy, there's a high probability it is a clandestine produced illicit pill that has fentanyl as its key agent or ingredient, and not within the purchasing. The only safe way to get those are through obviously the prescription of a doctor, through a legitimate pharmacy, and not through sales through what I call drug hub, because it's very similar to deliverables that are happening through the internet on social media. Most likely those, whatever you're purchasing, has been laced with or clandestine produced that is made to look like a legitimate pharmaceutical, but it is laced with fentanyl.
And thank you, Sheriff, for that. And thank you, Matt, for that question. Next question, Lizzie.
Yeah, so our next question comes from Terry Sforza from the Orange County Register. Her question is, many parents want the deaths themselves to be classified as poisonings and are pursued as such in the criminal justice system. What are your thoughts on that?
Can I speak to that real quick? I think
Please.
they should be classified as homicides. And our laws here in California make it very difficult to prosecute these cases as homicides, but we are seeing that done now here in Southern California. Our good sheriff, who I know is good friends of Sheriff Barnes, and our district attorney here in Riverside County, Mike Hestron, have charged in 3 separate cases now, murder charges against those who are dealing fentanyl. And I hope other counties will follow suit throughout California.
I think that's spot on, Matt. I think when we're talking about a substance that is deadly, when 2 grains of sand, 2 milligrams of this substance are known to be deadly, and you have people who are knowingly manufacturing and selling 30-gram tablets to our kids, saying that's an accidental overdose, it is just not accurate. It is knowing and willful homicide. Any other thoughts on Terry's question before we move on?
I just want to share that I can't go into investigations that are ongoing within the Sheriff's Department, but we are looking at this through a different lens today than we had previously. I think a lot of the light has been brought into this, and we have several investigations ongoing that are going to be hopefully changing the perspective of how these cases will be reviewed and filed.
We have another question from Carrie Sforza from the Orange County Register. What is being done about these social media platforms? I've asked Instagram and Snapchat to respond to these charges, but I'm not getting much of a response.
Let me start this, and this is something that is decades old. There is a provision within the law that protects these enterprises from the content of their users. It actually makes them gives them a safe haven to where they're not responsible for the actions of the individuals who are using their platforms. I believe that legislation is significantly outdated, needs to be updated. I do not believe that you can knowingly ignore the conduct of your users when you are fully aware of what your platform is being used for. That's the first part of that. That's specific to any of these platforms, not anyone specifically, but some are used more than others. I also believe there's issues with the protections within the underlying platforms. The dark web, going dark, all these issues create a significant threat. The dark web is layered protection in some of these platforms, and it's now allowed to exist openly in the dark web. Not only narcotics trafficking, where you can go onto the web, just like you would onto Amazon or Google or anywhere else and order up narcotics and have it delivered to you. That also exists for pedophiles to exchange child pornography and exchange techniques on how they can encourage others to perform. International and domestic terrorist groups are operating on the dark web, where there are extremist groups are operating the dark web. I think that needs to change on how that can operate and give us access to those platforms to investigate and also prohibit illegal activity that threatens not only our children, but national security and other issues that take place and for our kids. So those issues need to change as well. We were working with Department of Justice on those previously. I'm on the Criminal and Justice Coordinating Council, which is part of the Department of Justice, as the representative for major county sheriffs. We've made that platform known. I intend to work strongly on a national level to hopefully entertain legislation through the federal government, through our Congress, to change those protections that are available to make I'm not talking about accountability from them, but to prohibit those who are operating from operating the way they do with impunity. They need to prohibit these abilities for these individuals to function the way they do openly and without the protections that are existing with outdated laws. Terry, did I answer your question? I know you're muted, but.
And just to add to that, Terry, I think that as we've seen all throughout history, criminals are very good at exploiting advances in technology and are often, frankly, the bad guys are one step ahead of the good guys. And I think both in this instance and as the sheriff outlined in numerous others, we are seeing a real exploitation of our social media platforms to cause incredible harm and incredible devastation, and in the case of this, death. And I think that we really are in the midst of a reckoning around the roles and the responsibilities of social media platforms in this arena, and frankly, I think in many others. So we will be actively engaged in that conversation here at the state level. And as Sheriff Barnes said, I expect there to be movement on a federal level as well.
And just for clarification, I don't want to be misconstrued in what I said by any of the members participating. When I use the term going dark is end-to-end encryption on electronic devices. And a lot of these drug dealers, when you catch them, their devices are encrypted. You can't get access to them. And I'm not asking for an illegal backdoor into the devices. What we're asking for are these manufacturers such as Apple to give us a legitimate front door in with a search warrant that gives us access to the contents of the activities of these criminals on these electronic devices. One of the best examples I can give is how difficult this can be. If you remember the Blaze Bernstein homicide from about 3 years ago in South Orange County, we recovered the iPhones from both Blaze Bernstein and Mr. Woodward, who was the perpetrator of that homicide. And we asked Apple to help us through a warrant get access to those devices. And they told us no, they weren't going to help us. 6 weeks later, we were able to crack into the phones and get all the information we needed that led to the hate crime indictment against Mr. Woodward and his actions, but we did that on our own. Apple had the audacity to ask us how we did it. And no, we're not going to share our secrets if you're not going to help us solve crime. These are platforms that are now being exploited by bad actors at the expense of people who are being duped, including those young teens and young adults who think they're getting access to something that it's not. It's something laced with a dangerous poison that they're ingesting. And I can't say it any other way. If you had a teenager who wanted us to buy a pack of cigarettes that they're not allowed to access, if they're 13, 14, 15 or whatever, and they bought a pack of cigarettes off somebody and it was laced with LSD or fentanyl, we would not be okay with that. That's a good example of what's happening in these circumstances. Still not legal, and we're not promoting that it's okay to get access to these opioids. That's still not okay, but it's not definitely not okay to be sold something that's deliberately poisoning people and killing them, which is happening in these circumstances.
So thanks, Terry, for that question. Lizzie, who's up next?
That will be all for our questions right now. If members of the media have any more questions, you're welcome to stay on Zoom with our speakers following us ending our live stream. I will now pass it back to the Assemblywoman for some closing statements.
Senator Bates, parting thoughts before we end.
I think this is a very, very enlightening discussion. I'm hoping that the media picks up and gives us a little maybe front advertisement before we go to committee so that they know how intent our mission is and how important it is. We just have to stop this poisoning of our young people, harming families. I mean, the tragedies I think you had, and I know I had a little lump in my throat when you hear these stories, and it just has to stop. We just have to be successful on this round. So I'm glad that we're teamed and we've got it on both sides of the building, as we say, and I think we will be successful. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for all the participants, especially our parents. I want to reiterate that takes incredible courage to come forward and share such deep grief, and you know that we share that with you. So we will overcome. We will make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Sheriff Barnes, any parting thoughts?
I agree with Senator Bates, and I have to thank once again Amy, Jaime, and Matt for sharing their tragedies that they've experienced. And obviously that pain does not go away. They're going to be carrying this for a long time. And the greatest travesty in this is that we have 3 new parents next year telling the same story. And that needs to be avoided at all possible. And I want to thank you, Assemblywoman Petrie-Norris. You're a good friend, and I love working with you because I know your heart's in the right place, looking out for saving our children in the future. Senator Bates, we've had this conversation way too many times, and this is now our 6th year to carry this legislation. There shouldn't be a 7th year. What I'm going to ask of the media is most important. Please follow these 2 bills and report on their progress and share the importance of them. So if we don't keep this in the forefront and highlight where these bills are and how they're being entertained or considered, they oftentimes will fall out of the public's eye. And this is something that is too important to not be followed, tracked, supported. My hope is that you'll see the impacts of these. Look outside of the anti-incarceration and criminal justice reform issue and look at the impacts that these actions have had upon families within the state. It's going to get much worse unless we get out now and we're being responsive in many ways. We try to be proactive, but we cannot be responsive next year again to the tragedies that are being presented to the public. So please follow these 2 bills and report on their status and support them as you see necessary so that we can right a wrong in the California law. I thank you once again, Assemblywoman Petrie-Norris, for hosting this. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for including me.
Well, thank you, Sheriff. And I guess just in closing, I'd say I am here this morning as an Assemblywoman, and I am also here as a mom. I've got 2 boys who are 12 and 13 years old. And as I listened, Jaime and Amy and Matt, to your stories, so struck by the fact that it could happen to anyone. It could happen to me and my kids. It could happen to anyone who was listening. And it's so clear that this crisis is urgent. It's so clear that we must act immediately. We must stop these tragic deaths, and we must ensure that those who are profiting from fentanyl, those who are poisoning our kids, know that there are consequences and know that the punishment will fit the crime. This, in my view, is an important first step to addressing the deadly fentanyl epidemic all across the state. So I want to thank everyone who's joined us today for your partnership and for your continued leadership on this issue. And to members of the media, as the sheriff said, we need your partnership as well to ensure that we build awareness about the issue, about the threats, about the danger, and that we build, frankly, a pressure campaign across the state legislature so that we can get these bills over the line and do what's right for California kids. With that, thank you. And our offices are available if you need additional information or any follow-up.